So I'm very honored to be here this evening. So I just want to share a few thoughts in terms of what I understand and also some of my experiences. Already from what I heard from the Chair Emeritus, there's a lot that has been going on. There's a lot of depth. So in case I don't sound very deep in terms of spiritual, but just forgive me. It's my first time. I'll get to learn along the way. So I think the chair had also shared some thoughts about what he would like me to talk about. So my message is tailored around what he talked about. I think one of the things he talked about is the theme. Was about consolidating the gains, advancing the cause. And in terms of what the overall thinking and in terms of the address should focus on is about Christian professionals as a resource in advancing godly values in society. So let me start by extending my appreciation. Distinguished guests, members of the KCPF board, the advisory council, the secretariat, the committee members, the partners, and all KCPF members, colleagues, and fellow Christian professionals, good evening. So it's a privilege and an honor for me to stand here this evening as we gather under the timely theme that, as I mentioned, consolidating the gains, advancing the cause. And while I will speak on Christian professionals as a resource in advancing godly values in society, allow me first to touch on the importance of consolidating the gains. And I think from my understanding, this requires two things from us. The first is gratitude, and the second is courage. And so it asks us to look back with thanksgiving at what God has enabled the organization to achieve over the past 15 years, as was so very well explained. And also to look forward in faith towards the territory that we are yet to claim. And I think a lot has been said already in terms of what is ahead and the kind of challenges and the issues that we are grappling with ahead of us. So it's very crucial for every organization in the process of consolidating those gains to recognize the faithfulness of God. And across our nation, despite the many challenges we see across our country, believers continue to influence workplaces with integrity. And Christian voices have remained present and vital in the public discourse. Families have been strengthened through ministry. Young people continue to be mentored. And research has informed public policy. And advocacy has protected vulnerable communities, and our networks have grown stronger by the day. And these achievements, they exist because ordinary men and women have chosen to live out their faith beyond the walls of the church. And our achievements, these achievements that have already been highlighted over the past 15 years, are milestones that are worth celebrating and a foundation upon which we can build. So the mission is clear. I also took a lot of time to go through your annual report and the profile. And it's what basically we are saying is that we are called to be witnesses, contending for biblical values through advocacy, through research, through networking, and mentorship. And this brings us to a very fundamental question. What does it mean for a Christian professional to be a resource in advancing godly values in society? In the world today, in a culture where there is growing secularism and there is a shrinking space for faith in many professional settings, the question has become increasingly important. And yet, if you go to the scriptures have never separated faith from the vocation. And I'll just give you a few examples. Joseph was the prime minister of Egypt. You all know the story of Joseph. He did not influence Egypt because he held that very powerful office. He influenced Egypt because Pharaoh discovered that he could trust Joseph. He had a track record. When you go to the story of Daniel, it was not Daniel's political ambitions that changed Babylon. It was because of his excellence, his integrity, that distinguished him above every other public official in that kingdom at that time. And that really is the blueprint for us as Christians. Joseph served in government. Daniel influenced an entire empire. When you read the Bible, the story of Esther, she shaped national destiny. She rescued the Israelites who were facing extinction. And we also know about the story of Nehemiah, who led public administration. We also know the story of Lydia, who was a businesswoman. The book of Luke, the story of Luke. Luke was a physician. He was a medical doctor. Paul, his profession was a tent maker. And he was doing all this while planting churches. We also learn about Deborah, who was a judge. Every single one of those people, and there are many others who have mentioned, their professions were not just jobs. They were the platforms for God's purpose. So for us as Christians, the marketplace remains one of the greatest mission fields for our generation. And while attending church formally, the formal church attendance, we may see shifts, the workplace remains a constant point of contact. Many people may never enter a church, but they will encounter our leadership, they will encounter our honesty, our fairness, and our compassion. So long before they listen to anything that we believe, before we tell them about our beliefs and what we, where we worship and what we do, they will observe how we work, how we lead, how we treat other people, and even how we respond under pressure. Our lives become the first sermon that people hear. And I'll give you an example. I've told you, you've already heard from my profile. I'm a member of Ridgeway's Baptist Church. So sometime in 2010, our founding pastor is called Elijah Wanje. In fact, he's retiring. He's retired. We have his appreciation service this coming Sunday. But 15 years ago, he comes from Malindi. So we organized a few of us, about 25, 30 of us, to go and visit his father. His father was one of the founding pastors of the Baptist churches in Kenya. So we traveled to Malindi by bus. So we got a bus and we traveled to Malindi on a Friday. So when I was in that bus, I sat next to a friend of mine who I have known him through church. But of course, you can imagine, if you're going to travel from Nairobi to Malindi and you're sitting next to somebody, you will talk. You talk everything. You talk about your job, your business. So we really talked a lot. And this guy is a businessman. So he talked to me about the experiences, things he's done. And there's one thing I remember he told me. He said, I have done a lot of business, but I can tell you, if I'm involved in some discussions and negotiations and deals, and someone tells me he's a believer or a Christian, my antenna goes up. Why? Because those are the guys who have conned me. So you can imagine what that tells you, that you're professing to be a believer and a Christian, but in his experience, those are the guys who have messed him up in business. So what does that say about the kind of image that we present? So we may say all the things we do. We may talk about going to church every Sunday and carry very big Bibles and do all the things that externally show that we are Christian. But if your behavior is not reflective of that of a Christian, there is no preaching that you can do that will be enough to convince somebody that you have, of what you uphold and the religion that you practice. So we have to be examples to people. So we have to be walking testament and testimonies of what Jesus expected his followers to be like. So that was just one example. And in the workplace, I'm sure you've worked through two types of people. There may be someone who is very brilliant, but yet he leaves everyone around completely exhausted because everybody is walking on eggshells. They are very careful. They are very sensitive about managing their ego. And the second person might not be the loudest person or the smartest person, but everyone wants to work with them because they instinctively make the people around them better. So which of these people do you think leaves a greater legacy? Of course, it's the person who is quiet and able to generate and engender trust. So research shows that people who shape organizations over time are people whom we trust. And teams will willingly follow people who are competent, yes, but also people who are honest, humble, and consistent. And so competence may be distinguish an individual, but character is the multiplier because it shapes an entire culture. So we as Christians are expected to be people of character. So what I've just said resonates very deeply with me because it's a reminder that we are called not just to speak about our faith, but to actually embody that faith. And how do you embody that faith? By living a life that is marked by excellence, by humility, and by integrity. So when our work reflects those qualities, people see something that the words alone cannot communicate. So your behavior will say a lot more than anything that you will talk about. And that is how we let our light shine so that the world can observe our character and recognize the source. So the values that are embraced by this organization, that is KCPF, provide a very deeply practical framework for living out that calling. And just tonight, I want to just frame those core values as our 5 pillars of influence. And I'll talk about each of them. The first is professionalism. The second is courage, care, integrity, and stewardship. So let's talk about professionalism. When it comes to professionalism, many view professionalism as appearance, etiquette, very polished communication. There's a way engineers talk, there's a way doctors talk, there's a way lawyers talk. But in my view, it is the disciplined pursuit of excellence in whatever you do. That is what professionalism is all about. And if we are going to influence society, we must first become people whose work earns us respect. Remember those people I mentioned in the Bible? It is their work that earned them the respect and the influence that they had. So in the workplace, excellence is our currency because that creates credibility, which is an enabler of influence. And we must make it our personal mission to honor God with meticulous precision and rejecting mediocrity. We should ensure that in all that we do, that we are not associated with mediocrity, but with excellence. And in fact, in Paul, in the book of Colossians, Paul reminds the believers in Colossae that whatever they do, they should work wholeheartedly, as working for the Lord. So our daily work is an act of worship. And it deserves our very best efforts, our best thinking, and our highest standards. And so when our work consistently reflects excellence, people begin to trust us, not only in terms of our abilities, but also the convictions that shape those abilities. So the next one I want to talk about is courage. And when it comes to courage, there are moments in every profession when doing what is right comes at a personal cost. And I'll give you my experience. About 10 years ago, actually in 2017, I had a major client. As you know, I work in an asset investment management business. We take care of assets for clients. So we had this very big client, and it was a public sector organization. And I was approached by one of the people in that organization and told there are certain things we need to do, and you must do this. And I listened, and I realized that this is something that is going to compromise our values and our ethics. So the first just because he's a Christian or he thinks that he's the best person, anajiona yeye ni mtu, he's up there. So I remembered when I now realized that I was under the risk of losing that client. Of course, it was very big, and of course, because I'm leading an organization, I also was aware that we are going to lose a lot of money as a result of losing this client. So I contacted a board member in that organization who happened to be, I'm in Bible study fellowship. So I'm a leader in Bible study, and he was also a leader. So I talked to him about this problem, and I told him, by the way, this is happening. Can you see what you can do? Whether you can intervene. And he did his best, and I basically acted like a whistleblower. on this particular issue. And he tried to do what he could. But can you imagine at the end of it all, both of us lost. As a result of that, he was fired as a board member, and I was fired as the asset manager of that particular institution. To this day, we've never been able to get that business. But I'm just giving you this example to tell you that a lot of times, some of these things, acting with integrity, will come at a personal cost. And for me, of course, the personal cost is, in terms of organizations, we work with budgets and targets, and you've made commitments to the board. You said, this year we are going to achieve this. So of course, when you lose a large client that contributes probably 25, 30% of your income, you will not achieve the targets that you have set. So even today, when I make my presentations about our growth in assets, 2017 will always show a dip. And I always have to explain. So they ask you, so when I'm going to pitch for business, they'll always ask me, so Einstein, can you tell us what happened in 2017? And I have to go back and tell them, oh, you know, this is... And of course, I also have to be very careful because I still want to eventually one day get that business. So I cannot talk so badly. I can just try and say something happened and not try and go into a lot of details. But that is the reality, that you may try to do the right thing, but it will come as a personal cost. But what I realize is also very important is I also need to be able to sleep at night. That knowing that you've done the right thing, but you need to realize that it may come as a personal cost. So in workplaces where policy and behavior can be performative, people naturally, they will exercise caution. But it takes courage to defend the truth when it is unpopular and to refuse unethical shortcuts when they appear profitable, and to uphold convictions in the Bible, biblical conviction, when it is easier to compromise. The scriptures remind us that societies are transformed by people who are willing to stand when it is costly. You know the story of Rahab. Rahab was living on the wall of Jericho. And she was a woman who was facing the imminent collapse of her entire world. So when the spies, the Israelite spies, entered her city, she chose to harbor them. And that was a choice that actually amounted to treason, because she was actually harboring people who are going to eventually result in the collapse of Jericho. The cost of her being discovered was immediately. It was certain execution. Yet, because she recognized the sovereignty of God, and if you read those scriptures, you'll see her reference to God. She risked everything, she stood firm, and she hid the spies. And because of that courage, posture that she adopted, not only was her entire family spared from destruction, but we also know that this unlikely woman was woven directly into the lineage of Jesus Christ. If you read the lineage of Jesus Christ, so you've seen somewhere Rahab is mentioned. And you also know what her profession was. She was not a very straightforward person. But because of the courage she exhibited, she is in the Bible as in the lineage of Jesus Christ because of courage. So she changed history because she refused to bow to the fear of what was happening in her immediate surroundings. So every day, it presents opportunities for us to demonstrate that kind of courage. And when we value truth above applause, we step fully into our identity as ambassadors. The third one is care. A lot of people mistake leadership for authority or for status. And I'm sure you've seen, especially in Kenya, when you're a leader, there's a certain aura that presents. But in reality, the reality is leadership is measured by service and how the decisions that you make shape the lives of people. So to have care is to treat every individual with dignity, to create environments where people can flourish and they can extend grace without abandoning accountability, and to recognize that every colleague, every customer, and every employee bears the image of God. So when people experience genuine care, they encounter something that is increasingly rare in today's workplaces. So if you just want to make a difference in people's life, just exhibit care, and you will be surprised at what impact you will have. So let's talk about integrity. That's the fourth one. In a world where that seems to celebrate cutting corners, integrity remains one of the greatest assets we can have. When you're competent, you have talent, it can open very many doors for opportunities. But it is integrity that keeps that door open. Talented professionals are very easy to find. You can find a lot of talented people. But professionals whose word can be trusted without hesitation are far less common. And I'll give you an example. This is a very simple example, which I recall with a lot of amusement. So my mother is 84 years old. And I remember in my earlier days, if she had an event, like a wedding or a major event, she'd always plan, to get a dress for that particular occasion, as I'm sure many ladies do. So she would get the material, and then she would go to this tailor. And then they would agree she would get measured, and they'd do all the things that need to be done. And there would be a date that she would pick the dress, and the drama would start there. So she would now come home complaining, I went to this guy, he has not finished my dress, I don't know what I'm going to do. And you can see the blood pressure is just increasing. So eventually the dress would come and it would be very nice, and she would be very smart, and she would appear nice, and we tell her, Mom, you look excellent. And guess what? The next event, she would go to the same tailor. So I remember I used to ask her, Mom, weren't you the other day complaining and making a lot of noise about this guy that he's delayed you and all that? But then she would tell me, but he's the best tailor. He's the only person who can make the dress to the quality. But I also ask myself, it is with so much pain. So when I think about talent, so this is a very talented tailor, but he lacks integrity because I'm sure many ladies can affirm, he probably has told everyone, Kesho, come for your dress. So he has told you, you come tomorrow, you come the following day. So when you all turn up, there's problems. So he is not someone who is very organized, and therefore you cannot keep or trust his word. So that is an example for me of talent, but without integrity. So you are unable to keep promises. And so I'm sure very many ladies can relate to what I've just said. So when we become known as people whose actions consistently match our convictions, we also strengthen the credibility of the gospel that we profess. So we must be people of integrity. And then the last one is in terms of stewardship. Everything that is entrusted to us, our abilities, our influences, our resources, our relationships, and opportunities, all that is held in trust. The focus is not on how much we have, but how faithfully we manage what God has placed in our hands. And for me, stewardship is direct because, as I told you, I manage assets. So people, clients, entrust me with their money. They expect me to take care of that money, to protect it, to grow it. So for me, stewardship is a thing that comes to mind every day of my life. And I'm sure even for all of us, we are stewards of something. We may be stewards of students. We have been placed, students have been brought to us. I was telling Dr. Jenga, I'm a parent. I have been a parent at Strathmore University. Two of my sons have been students there. So you have been entrusted with students to take good care of them. So all of us have been entrusted as stewards in one way or another. So the focus really is about not how much we have, but how faithfully we manage what God has placed in our hands. So of all these values, stewardship perhaps carries the greatest responsibility, because one day, every steward will give an account. And of course, it is also in the scriptures. So you don't need to look further than the parable of the talents. The master did not give each servant the same amount. He distributed the resources according to the abilities of each of those servants. So when he returned, he assessed each steward on their faithfulness to invest it. The steward given 5 talents and the steward given 2 talents, if you read the Bible, they received the exact same commendation. They were told, well done, good and faithful servant. But the one who buried his treasure, his resource out of fear, he was stripped of his position. So this is a very sobering reminder to us that God expects a return on everything. He invests in us. So the pillars of KCPF translate those values into very practical action. Protecting life, promoting family values, defending religious freedom, advancing value-based education, and championing good governance and ethical leadership. All those are very important issues that we are grappling with as a country today. None of us will accomplish this alone. These pillars are lived out every day by professionals who make very principled decisions in boardrooms, in the classrooms, in hospitals, in courtrooms, and public offices. And every ethical choice, every act of courage, every decision that we make to serve rather than exploit, it contributes to the kind of society that we hope to build. So as we prepare for the future, we must also remember that another generation is watching. They are also asking whether faith still has relevance in modern society. They are asking whether integrity can survive in this very competitive environment. They are asking whether ethical values or ethical leadership is still possible. They also ask whether biblical values remain practical in everyday life. And I'll also give you my example. So I'm a father of 3 Gen Zs. That's a very important statement. They are Gen Zs. So my eldest son is turning 29 at the end of in September. The second born is turning 26 on Monday. And the last one is 24 in October. So they're all young men. And as you probably know about Gen Zs, they question everything. So my wife and I are always answering very many questions about issues. And in fact, I remember those 2 gentlemen who were in Strathmore. So they turned to be voters on voting age just before the 2022 elections. So I remember I told them, now you need to register as a voter. And they told me, in school, we are not voting. We don't believe in voting. You guys, nothing happens, nothing changes. Because so I had to make presentations explaining why it is important to vote. And at some point, it got to a point where I was losing the battle. So I used my executive authority, finally. So I live on off Kiambu Road. So those of you who know, there's a place called Kirigiti. There's a church called St. Paul's. So one day when I was going home on my way from work, I found an IEBC, those mobile registration desks. So I got home and I told them, let me tell you something. There is just a few kilometers from here, there's an IEBC. Tomorrow evening when I come home, if you guys have not registered as voters, we are not going to sleep in this house. We are going to have a serious fight. So fortunately, I think the following day, in the afternoon, my wife called me and told me, oh, by the way, your guys have just come from. So everything is okay. But I'm just giving this example to tell you, life is not easy. I always ask myself, if I asked my father the kind of questions these guys ask me, my father would have dealt with me very seriously. Can you people imagine questioning your parents? Their authority was final. There was no way you could start asking questions. Why should I vote? Or why should I do this? So those are the realities of today. But the thing is, they are watching us. So when we talk about ethics, when we talk about integrity, they can easily bring out examples of how you're not practicing that integrity. In the organization today, I actually have a forum where I talk to Gen Zs. Every quarter, we actually sit and we talk. And they really question me. They ask me very many questions. In fact, some of them are like, how can I get to be CEO in 10 years? You've just heard, I've been working for 27 years. It has taken me so many years to get here. Someone is telling me by the time I am 30 or 35, I want to be a CEO, I want to be financially independent. I'm like, I'm still not financially independent and I'm nearing retirement, and you're telling me here that I want to. But the thing is, they are watching us. They're watching us at home, they're watching us in the workplace. And so, how we uphold and live our lives has to be an example. And they tell you things to your face. And they will not find convincing answers in our statements alone. Those answers, they will find them in the way we live. And that is how causes advance. When you read the book of Matthew, chapter 7, when Jesus addressed the crowd, he talked about false prophets. And he gave them a simple test of discernment. He told them, you will know them by their fruits. So these words are very relevant to us today. What we profess carries weight only when it is confirmed by the way that we live. So our character and our conduct and our daily choices reveal that which truly shapes us as individuals. So it is by our collective effort and the fruits that society will recognize who we are. And it is through those fruits that transformation will take root in our culture. So as we live here tonight, I hope that we will see and consolidate the gains that we have achieved with gratitude. We will advance the cause with conviction, and we will faithfully steward every opportunity that God places before us. And I pray that God will grant us wisdom in leadership, courage in conviction, integrity in the actions that we take, compassion in service, and faithfulness in stewardship. So I take this opportunity to thank you all, and I pray that God will bless you all richly. Thank you very much.